How's everybody doing today? Welcome to another edition of I Just Woke Up. I tried eating animal protein again about, I guess, a week ago. It's like 4 days before Thanksgiving, and it's real bright in here, so my eyes are like squinty. And a little dry, but somehow between those 4 days I ended up getting fairly basic gastrointestinal disorder, like bacteria, and so that was terrible, the most terrible thing that could happen. This is something I can add here, which is kind of weird. So my version of illness is not the same as others, and it's not the same as people who basically haven't been through certain programs, namely the certain aspects of the genetic engineering and certain biological changes involved with certain programs. Because some of the goals, the directives were to provide a species-wide genetic level immunity to basically every disease that exists, including reactions that exist, which are basically like symptomatic. And so it's just something to add there, because I also made it sound like it was probably a lot worse than it was. But it's not that it was or wasn't bad. It's the fact that regularly, since certain stage of the projects, basically the immunity projects were at least partially successful, not marginally, but majority of what is attempted. And so that's interesting. But it's just something to say there, because this is like the second recording of this video, and I want to say it the first time. And but it's also weird because it's kind of borderline propaganda if it's just coming from me, and it becomes part of a reason to or to not do something based upon how one gathers information regarding the situation, these projects, these technologies and chips and things like that. But as well, yeah, I'll just let you continue listening. Thank you. And I ate meat for a couple more days. Well, actually, didn't eat anything for like 2 or 3 days. And I probably won't continue doing it, but it felt real weird. Low energy, and mainly the cold came in. And I have so many injuries, my joints lock up and everything, and it's just a big pain all around. That's part of the reason I've been not necessarily distracted, but I don't even know, trying to formulate ways to get ideas across, and the ideas are literally, it doesn't even make sense to describe it. Like the stuff we see in movies, it's just like board game by comparison to what I'm trying to explain. And I've done a little bit more looking into some of these other disclosure personnel, which is what it is, what I was briefed upon. Individuals more or less chosen for disclosure, and it's pretty much the same stuff. I think Tony Rodriguez, wow, I need to wake up. Rodriguez, and I don't know why I can't say that name right now. And the abuse, manipulation, temporal manipulation, biological genetic manipulation, mind control, training and conditioning, and transportation to basically exotic environments. You know, that's the basis of what's going on. So look into that. Then there's someone else, was it Michael Gerlach? Or Gerloff. And I recognize some of these people, so if not the majority of the people, so it's very awkward in a strange way, because I don't know, we're all out on the surface. It's like Showtime, and it's weird because we thought back then was Showtime, which it was. You know, it was game time then, but now it's a whole new ballpark, it's a whole new arena, It's a whole new sim. It's a whole new level of sim intensity. And so, yeah, his information. I don't know if you see it, Michael. There's more memories. And I was briefed on the majority of people coming out. So, I'm not here to like play games with anyone's head, anyone's priorities or intentions, and basically psychological satisfaction for coming out, because that's part of a cathartic healing process of telling people, like, yo, this happened. It was like 12 to 20 years ago. I was like, I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't do anything. There were high-level military personnel and so on that know about it. Some maliciously, or so it seemed. Some just managerially, and some just in terms of maintenance and like basically employees weren't as involved, or their intentions weren't so close to someone else. And you have others that are like literally in your mind, in your face, in your system, trying to make decisions, or have you make decisions which are not earth level decisions, basically, or at least what we think. They're CEO level decisions, billion-dollar corporations, and that's where they're having cadets basically go through and make decisions and they're making decisions that you wouldn't find in any situation of like mass possible casualties and research and development, and having to take sacrifices for a group and accept it for that group vicariously, knowing that it's going to protect or provide some type of resource or benefit in the whole or for another group. And they're making those decisions, these high-level operatives, more so supervisor type individuals, and our minds would shatter, the people out on the surface here, just even realizing that, because it's impossible to instantly come to terms with or be okay with. They have to be just like the child operatives or different groups that are involved. You gotta be prepared your entire life for that. But that's going on. That's going on, and operatives seeing that, trainees, etc. It's mind blowing, but as well, it's like, well, I can't change anything if I'm like, I don't like the way this room is painted or something, or I don't like the fact that I've been here for 2 to 14 weeks and I still don't know why I'm actually here. In the larger picture, you can't change it. Well, maybe I'll get back to that, because you can't change the stuff that you're not really supposed to have anything to do with, including knowing about. However, like was said in one of the videos, you always have the right to ask where you are, and that's something I was told as well, because you're not going to have any way of doing it. You're in an exotic environment which is off the surface of the, what you call Earth. Oh, that helps a lot. I'll walk that direction if I ever want to escape and get this. It's a non sequitur. It doesn't mean anything. But for later, it will help, and that's the disclosure of all, basically, what has been classified information regarding these research and development projects that are research and development, as well as fully operational in terms of having troops in these exotic environments and carrying out the construction of bases and the expansion of infrastructure. And basically what it comes down to is a kind of it never reverted. If all of a sudden you see people vying for land and power, you wouldn't say we reverted back to conquest ages, the Middle Ages. If you didn't know, you might. But if you knew that this was going on, you will say, oh, it's coming out now. Because it's conquest-based functionality and operation. It's just like the game, what was it? Not Life, but it might have even been Conquest, the game. There's a couple of them. We used to play them in school, where all your players go and you build, you work your way up through the layers of the stages of development with your little town, your village, and then you get into higher and higher levels of conquest and military and research and things like that. It's been that the whole time. It's just been groups seeing how they can chop up the land and who's basically going to make a move that's so maybe drastic, but more so like a power loaded move, but it's so secure and stabilized that all these other players are inactive at that point in time, just like a board game or something. And now they've got this area, this land, this exotic environment, this ice, city or something, or underground, whatever. And it's been that way all the way up since it started, since whatever. The question is, what will it take to get out of that more so phase? And at this point, it's difficult to say because we have both what you call terrestrial and non-terrestrial threats to our stability as a society. And this was a lot of what has to do a lot of has to do with a lot of what went on in all the projects and all assets. If there's certain research and development, and it's like they realize, well, this environment is dangerous for this, and this. Well, part of the research and development will be slightly focused now on how to overcome that and possibly create a complete immunity to this type of environment and this type of situation, these threats, in biological format, not just a biosuit or something like that, but literally a lot of it revolved around breeding and genetic engineering. And so they're trying to not, this guy you plug in and then Joe can come over and he plugs in too and he's good. No, you have one selected bloodline that's literally capable of overcoming this environment, and he could be in a loincloth. It's in his genetics. It's not gonna, you can't, how are you gonna steal that technology? So then imagine there's self-destruct, things like that, and so it's very secure and powerful. But those were along the lines of how benefits were always brought about, and there's so many things that can't be explained that I've wanted to explain over the past couple months that are just I gotta do this and it comes out that way. When I get it like half stream and I'm like, oh, that's something they need to know about, it'll look like a circus or something. It won't make sense. But for instance, this aspect that everything is overwatched. There's always overwatch. Maybe oversight. In that sense, though, whenever something is powerful enough to produce a technology, and this was what I believe Tony said, whenever anything is produced, developed, the result of research, invented, brought about, technology for the most part, but there's also methods. He talked about something else that I probably won't mention because these are traumatic situations, but you use elements of nature to bring about a kind of psychological change with a facial kind of mask game thing that they do. A visceral, sensual experience that's supposed to represent a kind of cathartic release from certain aspects of our own psychology, and they do this stuff and they hypnotize us, but they create very powerful alters. And that's part of what has to be classified and released in stages, because if you could see the whole map of just what that unit, just what that particular group and their aspect of the family knows, it would just look like one of these web charts, these diagrams of like how to, you place something here in the back of the neck there and tell them to look at a wall this way and do this and wait 50 seconds, blah, 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 and then there's an injection of this or whatever. There's so many methods of getting into a person's brain or their mind and creating an environment, a spiritual, psychological context for having them do or learn or see or feel something that we would never even know how to make sense of it. It wouldn't even look human. It doesn't. When you see the mind that went through all that, you would see your first non-terrestrial consciousness, because it's not something we experience on Earth. It's as if, I don't know, a big computer screen could pop up and every single reaction that you could have within like a 2-week period could show up as a button on that LCD screen, and they could just press whichever one they wanted, and each one would initiate a program that would bring about a certain response which we wouldn't even know existed. And so it's so in-depth, it's so mechanized, but as well free, because it's all in their heads. These people, they know how to use it all, they know how to manipulate people and know just the most powerful forms of that we don't even know how to compare it to anything down here. It wouldn't even make sense. We probably wouldn't just ignore it and just, yeah, right, that's not real, it couldn't happen. But that's part of how it works, how it accesses, and how it's organized. The idea is that's free. Everybody can figure out how to do those things. And I don't mean us. I mean, if you started a group, sure. And years and years and years, you're trying to get in these people's heads, and you figure out how to bend it a certain way. But the technology, it ends up getting sent up to a higher group that oversees all of this, and basically put into a program to sell and bring funds back to the one who initiated that, and to find people who can then advance it. And technology just goes from like a cherry blossom to a pineapple to a banana tree forest. It just jumps in stages because of this format for sharing, but also keeping it in a way like patented to whoever gets it, because whenever somebody gets something that's that powerful, they hide it. And but then people start realizing somebody has something crazy because there's changes being made in all the sensors, all the personnel, etc. Nobody knows what happened. They're using some type of higher technology, which is basically just going in and grabbing whatever they want or something like that. And then eventually, once they go, okay, well, what aren't they using? Then with a think tank of what now could they be using, they'll eventually lag behind a little bit, but they'll figure it out too and technology basically jumps up as they're doing this until it just looks like a cartoon. The technology, the bombs that can pass through solid foundations without disrupting it and then detonate beneath it. Like, where would you have ever seen that? Well, they have craft that can do that, so this is kind of how it works. We have craft that can phase in and out. Everybody knows that. It's like atoms in this environment are all hitting 1 or 2 o'clock and pinging, and everything that is doing this in this environment that you can see is pinging at 2 o'clock. So they have something that captures that oscillation and has it ping at 3 o'clock specifically, and so it moves in between our atoms. It's like the lights are turned on and off, on and off. Whenever it's on, you can see your light turns on and off in sync with the light that's in this environment. Now you can see. You change your light to turning off, on and off. Whenever that's off and on, you're offsetting it. Well, now you're like slipping through the dark, so to speak, and if everybody was around you and they can only move or see when the light was on, you're invisible to them. So craft can do that. Well, they make bombs that can do that. That's how it works. Technology jumps up and up, but it's also never, it's not only in what you would expect or want. It's in the most combative stuff you can imagine, because then imagine where you can replicate consciousness, you can replicate DNA, you can replicate timelines and memory experiences. Well, now we're living in a reality where we don't even know what's going on. It's gotten so out of control, but it is controlled, but it's just our ability to comprehend what's going on and what the possibilities are. It's a narrow window, and we'll have to catch up, basically, and then once that window is closed, it's not going to be really possible. That's where this whole situation comes in. I know I'm rambling now. Let's woke up a little bit, this happens. But that's where the situation goes in, where people would need chips or some type of upgrade to even comprehend the surface of the planet because it's so technologically advanced. And then who would refuse while the rest of society is upgrading themselves so they can live in this wonderful utopia? That's the whole situation. Maybe, that's not even the worst thing that could happen. Okay, so maybe just complete overt rule. Regardless, and there are plans with that as far as how if that is employed, it's basically done without people even knowing, meaning it's basically already happened, okay? But as well, that's all linked to things that will provide a benefit. It's not to purely, like, they have their own super soldiers. They don't need to turn every person into one like that, so on and so forth. It's to basically wash the unconscious mind. And I don't mean brainwashing, but, cycling, self-actualization, fulfillment. But the point is, how often is that the most pleasant thing anyone's ever gone through? Usually it's the most intense thing anyone's ever gone through. And so at the same time, a bunch of people going through that basically at the same time would be impossible. And so part of what I was briefed on is that it'll be introduced in stages to the point where people will have these experiences on their own through dream connections, contact, or whatever, which is more so technological, like relocation of consciousness, or these stages that will come out in public, kind of like a controlled release, but to pull the pin on all this BS. And that's the worst analogy or metaphor, to pull the pin, but more so, and even breaking the dam, but to basically bring disclosure to expose the corruption that's going on in the advanced technology that's been developed. I just want to say that for now. I have other things to say, but I need to wash my face and do things like that. So, alright, thank you.